Hey y'all, it's Caleb here again for the second episode of this YouTube channel. I wanted to take some time today to really iron out some definitions before we really get into anything about Arthur Koestler or about any other works of literature. I want to define very clearly a couple things. The first being, what is literature? What differentiates it from just like books and other pop culture? What are literary studies? That's like the academic side of studying literature. And then what is the purpose of literature and what is the purpose of literary studies? Just to kind of go right into it, literature is something that is relevant, technically sound, and its writing and its construction, and also something that has a high level of academic consensus. So like, why is something like Twilight not literature? It's not very technically sound. It does not have any kind of regard and any kind of academic consensus, and it's really not relevant. It doesn't have any themes or moments or characters that are going to make it last longer than like the cultural blip. Not just to bully on Twilight, that's actually most literature released, or most books released, are of that caliber. There's also a level of gatekeeping associated with literature as opposed to just like books. Kind of like I said, academia has a lot to do with it. What's being studied in colleges, what's being heralded by people of influence, social media plays into that. And also just what has a track record of being relevant. Frankenstein, a lot of Edgar Allan Poe was pulpy when it came out. Through time, through exposure, and through a building of consensus, it's become part of the literary canon. But canon itself is a controversial term and a controversial thing. What is canon? What is not? That occupied a lot of my time in my upper level English courses. So moving from literature, which is relevant, technical, there's consensus about it. So something becomes literature because people treat it like it's literature, because it earns that respect. So literature is something that's studied as an undergraduate. It's someone that's kind of coming into English and literary studies. But when you get more advanced, it actually becomes less about the literature and more about literary studies. So when I tell someone, oh, I'm getting my master's in literature, I'm not actually getting my master's in, a book or a genre or a, theme. I'm actually getting my master's in studying what people have already written about literature. So I wouldn't write a dissertation or a thesis on Arthur Koestler or Twilight or Frankenstein. I would actually write it about what people have said about it. This is something that personally really frustrated me because it is really asking you to synthesize and not produce. I wanted to be creative, and I wanted to approach text and questions from my own perspective, and of course bringing in that consensus from people that have come before me is important. But creation is not a part of literary studies for the most part. It's really detective work. It's piecing together, it's putting together a puzzle out of pieces that are in front of you. That's not to say that you're not making an argument or bringing yourself to the table. That's one area where literary studies is really suffering right now, is that it's actually become more of activism. It's becoming how can we influence society and culture through books, through literature. That's really important. Literature is capable of immense social change. Thinking particularly from books that I've had experience with and done literary scholarship on, Poor Cow by Nell Dunn. Not a lot of people have probably heard about it today, but in post-World War II England, that book was instrumental in passing a lot of legislation to help the impoverished people that were affected by World War II, particularly single mothers, or just like helping get contraceptives out to the impoverished people of England at the time. That book and a couple documentaries like Kathy Come Home, really important, immense social change. I'm thinking of, Uncle Tom's Cabin. I'm thinking of The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. These are books that allowed people to empathize with the struggles of people that they might not have familiarity with. So I don't know what it's like to be a slave, but I read the life of Frederick Douglass, and I can empathize with that. That, I think, is what separates literature from any other form of media and any other form of consumption. It's costly. reading is very costly. You can't multitask when you're reading. It demands you sitting there looking at the page. That's not like movies. That's not like TV shows. That's not even video games, which I think might be the best comparison, because video games put you into the role of a character which you control. But there's also something about reading, which is, one, it's more costly than playing a video game. It demands more attention than playing a video game. And also, you're kind of the psyche of the character. You're experiencing what they're experiencing, and you're being forced and complicit in their thoughts and their actions because you're enduring them with them. So, of course, this is a vehicle ripe for social change and activism, but that is not and should never be the goal of literature. The goal, in my opinion, which is, of course, subjective, should be quality. Make something good. Make something the best you can. Kill your darlings when possible. Stand your ground when possible through the creative process. If anything other than quality is the goal, it probably won't last, the test of time. That's a big part of being literature, is consensus. If you're not trying your absolute hardest to make it the absolute best, you're probably not being super technical. That's another aspect of literature. If you're just trying to overemphasize on the relevance of a text, of making something that is socially conscious, socially relevant, it's actually not going to have a strong enough foundation to warrant it even affecting that change. I think it's rare to think of a book that is not received well, that is not relevant years after its release, that isn't just a quality. Again, going back to things like Frankenstein, Bluest Eye, Uncle Tom's Cabin, these are engaging, gripping text. You have to finish the book for it to be relevant. So it has to be good to be finished. And I think that's essentially what I wanted to say about literature and literary studies and kind of differentiating those. So just a quick recap: literature is something that is kind of elevated above the status quo or the pop culture trends. It has to, in some way, whether it be through time, consensus, technicality, just quality, rising above trends. Literary scholarship is studying what other people have said about literature, or in not even necessarily literature, because I studied a lot of stuff that wasn't even in circulation and no one had talked about in like 70 years. So scholarship is studying what other people have said. And finally, we kind of talked about the social aspect, or the activism aspect of literature and literary studies. And to kind of wrap this up and put a button on where I'm headed with this YouTube channel, is I don't want to just talk about or write about what someone else has said or what else someone else thinks. I don't want to just synthesize. So much of our culture and so much of my life is consumption. Obviously food and Starbucks, a lot of Starbucks, but it's also a lot of consuming media and not producing. And I want to kind of be at a caloric deficit for creation. This YouTube channel can be an outlet for me to make arguments, to make proclamations, to express myself creatively. I watch a lot of YouTube. I watch a lot of Netflix and Disney Plus and movies, and I listen to a lot of podcasts, and that's consuming. And I'm kind of at a critical mass for that. So I really want to be someone that's creating. And I encourage everyone to do that because, like I said, there's gatekeeping when it comes to creating literature, but there is not gatekeeping with taking notes and writing short stories and writing poetry or writing songs. And I think that personally, every person would be better off, and in turn, society would be better off if everyone was expressing themselves more frequently and consuming less and creating more, because I think that there's a lot of meaning to be had in creation and putting something out there that's personal and makes you vulnerable, which is exactly what I'm doing right now, for better or worse. So with all that being said, I will see you all next time, hopefully where I get to come in and start talking about the plot summary of Arthur Koestler's Gladiators. So peace, see y'all later.